The Beverly Hillbillies, a story of fortune and family. Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed. He was a poor mountaineer who barely kept his family fed. Then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground came a bubbling crude. Oil, that is. Black gold. Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed is a millionaire. The kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. They said, California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is. Swimming pools. Movie stars. The Beverly Hillbillies. The sun shone brightly over the grand estate in Beverly Hills as the families settled into their new, opulent surroundings. Granny, a woman of strong character and even stronger opinions, was currently preoccupied with a minor crisis. She squinted her eyes and patted the pockets of her apron with increasing frustration. She declared to no one in particular that she could not find her glasses and must have left them on the airplane. Miss Jane, the ever-helpful and organized assistant to the banker, offered a comforting smile. She told Granny not to worry and promised that as soon as they arrived home, she would call the airline lost and found. Granny, being proud of her constitution, huffed and replied that it was not that she needed glasses, for she had what they called perfect vision. She turned to Jed for confirmation. Jed, ever the diplomat, simply listened as Granny continued her boast. She claimed to have eyes like a hawk. However, her hawk-like eyes were currently failing her. She mistook Ellie Mae for Jed and sought further validation. Ellie Mae laughed and identified herself, to which Granny blamed the sun being in her face. Miss Jane gently corrected her, noting that Mr. Clampett was not with them at that moment, but was arriving later with Mr. Drysdale. Granny then looked at the seat next to her and asked who was sitting in the back with her. Miss Jane informed her that it was merely her medical bag. Miss Jane suggested perhaps they should go back and get the glasses, but Granny remained stubborn. She insisted she did not need them and began calling out names like Joe, Herman, and Bessie. Suddenly, she spotted something approaching and identified it as Fairchild. She noted that he had a family and urged everyone to get inside before she summoned a family of buffaloes. Once inside the massive mansion, Jed took a deep breath of the air. He remarked that it was good to be home again and expressed his love for the room they were standing in. He suggested that somebody should move the piano. Granny, however, corrected him with a sharp tone, stating that the object he was referring to was actually the stove. She questioned what the stove was doing in the parlor. Miss Jane stepped in to clarify that they were actually in the kitchen. She then reiterated her intent to call the airline to see if they had found the glasses. Granny insisted she only needed them for reading. She then discovered a note from a young man who had been taking care of Ellie Mae's animals. When Miss Jane referred to him as a vet, Granny was confused. Miss Jane explained that he was a veterinarian. Granny replied that she had heard of them, but personally, she liked to eat meat. Miss Jane politely corrected her, saying that Granny was thinking of a vegetarian, whereas this young man was an animal doctor named Dr. Robert Graham. Jed recalled the name and mentioned that Mr. Drysdale had said the young fellow would be just right for Ellie Mae. He inquired about his whereabouts. Miss Jane read from the note, stating that he was down by the swimming pool. Jed decided he would saunter down there and say howdy to him. Miss Jane prepared to make her phone call. Granny, feeling a sudden chill, remarked that it had turned cold outside. Miss Jane pointed out that Granny had actually just opened the refrigerator. Concerned for Granny's navigation without her spectacles, Miss Jane suggested she should go down to the pool with Jed so she would not fall in. Granny dismissed the concern, claiming that once she was outside, she was on familiar ground. Down by the pool, a young man was busy with his aquatic patients. He made barking sounds as he interacted with the animals. He told a seal named Gloria that it was all for now and promised to be back after he had fed his other patients. Jed and Granny approached the area. Jed cautioned Granny not to be too anxious, fearing she might scare the doctor away. He suggested they make it look like an accidental meeting. Granny began to sing a Johnny tune about baking a cherry pie as a way to appear casual. She called out to Dr. Graham, noting his love for music. Due to her lack of glasses, she could not quite locate him. She asked where he was, and he replied that he was in the pool. Granny told him to swim over so she could get a good look at him and say howdy. She noticed his behavior and remarked that he should not be swimming with a cold like that. The doctor tried to speak, but Granny interrupted, warning him that his cold would turn into pneumonia if he did not get out of the water. He simply said goodbye. Back at the house, Miss Jane appeared as Fairchild arrived. She informed Jed that Mr. Drysdale wanted him to drive right down to the bank away. Jed asked where Granny was, and Miss Jane told him she was at the swimming pool meeting Dr. Graham. She identified him as the young veterinarian who had been looking after Ellie Mae's critters. Miss Jane added that Mr. Drysdale believed he would be a fine catch for Ellie Mae. Granny eventually returned from the pool, and Jed asked what she thought of the doctor. Granny was not impressed. She told Jed that Ellie Mae could not marry him because he was the ugliest man that ever grew a breath. She described him as having a pinhead, Popeye eyes, a straggly, droopy mustache, and no ears. Jed was surprised and suggested that even if he was plain, he must be smart since he was a doctor. Granny scoffed at the idea, complaining that he had coughed right in her face and was splashing around the pool with a terrible cold. Jed admitted that it did not seem bright, but figured Mr. Drysdale must see something in him. Granny disagreed, labeling him as homely rude and not too brainy, though she admitted the rascal could swim. Ellie Mae entered the room, intending to go down to the pool to meet the doctor. Jed tried to stop her, telling her the man was not for her. Ellie Mae reminded him that Mr. Drysdale said he was single, but Granny insisted that one look would tell her why. Jed eventually relented, thinking Ellie Mae should at least thank him for taking care of her animals. Granny warned her not to get too close because of the germs. Granny continued her complaints, telling Jed that the doctor had a breath like a bait bucket. She swore he had been eating raw fish. In the kitchen, Ellie Mae was busy fetching some raw fish from the refrigerator. Jed asked her what she thought of the doctor after her meeting. To Granny's horror, Ellie Mae described him as cute. Granny lamented that the girl was not just hard up, she was desperate. Jethro arrived, having moved the suitcases upstairs, and asked for some victuals. Granny, still upset, told him to fend for himself. Jed tried to reason with her, saying that people have different opinions, but Granny stood firm. She argued that a man who eats raw fish simply is not human. Jethro then entered the room, thanking Granny for the snack. When asked what he ate, he replied that he ate fish, noting it was a mite underdone but tasty. Later, Miss Jane arrived with good news. The airline had found Granny's glasses. Jed asked her to take them to Granny and encouraged her to foster the romance between Ellie Mae and the vet. Miss Jane admitted that Mr. Drysdale had essentially forced the doctor into the arrangement by threatening to foreclose on his animal hospital. She believed Ellie Mae was the catch of all time, representing a fortune of $85 million. By the pool, Ellie Mae and Dr. Graham, whom she now called Bob, were getting along famously. They discussed her collection of animals. Bob asked how she started it, and she explained that she used to find critters in the woods and bring them home. Bob expressed that he liked animals better than many people, a sentiment Ellie Mae shared. Bob's little brother, Jimmy, arrived with his pet otter named Charlie. Bob then asked Ellie Mae if she would like to go to dinner and the movie that night. She happily agreed. Jimmy and Charlie joined in the fun, with Jimmy deciding to go for a swim. Granny, still without her glasses, wandered outside and ended up in a storage closet, thinking it was her root cellar. She complained about the smog. When she finally encountered Jimmy in the pool, she mistook him for the doctor's little brother and decided he was just as homely as the doctor. Miss Jane finally delivered the glasses to Granny. When Granny put them on, she was shocked to see she was in a closet and not a cellar. She then realized she had seen the doctor's brother and maintained that the family were swimming fools. Ellie Mae told Granny about her date with Bob. Granny was heartbroken, having envisioned orange blossoms and rice for her granddaughter. Jethro then arrived, complaining of hunger. Granny told him of her broken heart, but Jethro was more concerned with food. Granny explained that Ellie Mae had fallen for an ugly man and was going to shame the family. Jethro suggested they might have to lock Ellie Mae in the attic, but his main priority was whether he could have her food. Miss Jane soon arrived with a handsome man, and Granny wondered why Ellie Mae couldn't have a man like that. Jethro, seeing an opportunity, decided to woo Miss Jane himself to clear the way. He told Miss Jane he was madly in love with her. As the confusion cleared, it turned out the handsome man was actually Dr. Graham. Granny had been mistaken all along because she hadn't been wearing her glasses. The man she thought was the doctor was actually a seal, and the little brother was an otter. Everyone was relieved. A double date was arranged with Jethro and Miss Jane, and Bob and Ellie Mae. Jed noted that they should eat early, because Jethro tended to get mean when he was hungry. The day ended with smiles and the promise of a wonderful evening for the family in their new home.